Let me read to you a passage from the third chapter of St. John's Gospel, verses 16 to 21. It's the Gospel for Wednesday of the second week of Easter. St. John writes, God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, so that everyone who believes in him might not perish, but might have eternal life. For God did not send his Son into the world to condemn the world, but that the world might be saved through him. Whoever believes in him will not be condemned, but whoever does not believe has already been condemned, because he has not believed in the name of the only begotten Son of God. And this is the verdict, that the light came into the world, but people preferred darkness to light, because their works were evil. For everyone who does wicked things hates the light, and does not come toward the light, so that his works might not be exposed. But whoever lives the truth comes to the light, so that his works may be clearly seen as done in God. That's from John chapter 3, verse 16 to 21. We are led to think of death. You know, the greatest practical problem facing the world and every man is death, and all that leads to death. Ultimately, sickness leads to death, as can poverty, as can unhappiness in its various forms. When I say that these various forms of human deprivation lead to death, I mean that they point to death, and that if they are unchecked and not dealt with appropriately, they favor those things that lead to death. Death is the great problem of man, the world, and the universe. The various discoveries of science and medicine attempt to postpone death or lessen its impact, but ultimately they cannot overcome it. Furthermore, from the point of view of plain evidence, what is there to suggest that death will cease being the victor even after it has put an end to this life? The spirit of man hopes that there will be an afterlife and strongly senses that there is. The religions of man indicate that man has a premonition that there is an afterlife. That said, conscience intimates that there will be a reckoning on one's deeds beyond death, and fears the result of it. Man could scarcely feel confident of his prospects in view of his proneness to sin and wrongdoing. What is there to ensure that death in some sense will not be the victor beyond the end of this life, even if there is some kind of afterlife for the soul of man? In other words, that there will not be a kind of second death. Many of the religions of man have very shadowy notions and imaginings about the afterlife, and those religions that speak of the equivalent of a heaven may, from the point of view of real evidence, may simply be indulging in pipe dreams. Such would be our somber prospects, I suggest, were it not for divine revelation. Death would always be the great black hole of the universe, into which we all disappear, never to return, a black hole in which there would never be light. But in fact, all is now different. Death is not and need not be the victor. In our gospel passage today, St. John writes that God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, so that everyone who believes in him might not perish, but might have eternal life. For God did not send his Son into the world to condemn the world, but that the world might be saved through him. John chapter 3, verse 16 to 21. Death has come through man's sin, and the Creator of all has entered our scene to reverse the situation facing all of us. At the origin of this stupendous divine initiative is love, God's love. He so loved the world that he sent his Son to save the world from death and its cause, which is sin. Christianity is not a simple religion, as Pope Paul VI once wrote, but we can say that there is a certain simplicity about its essential act. The essential act of the Christian faith, is faith. The essential act of the Christian is faith. Faith in Jesus Christ. Without this faith in him, for who he claimed to be, and for what he claimed to have done, one cannot profess to be a Christian. This act of faith is the foundation of the Christian life that follows. Now, St. John tells us in our passage that I read earlier, Christ came so that everyone who believes in him might not perish but might have eternal life. So the answer to death in the universe is to believe in Jesus Christ. Of course, it is not as simple as it sounds, because this act of faith in the person of Jesus Christ involves a full acceptance of his revelation and a life lived according to its demands and implications. Nevertheless, we have in this sentence the answer to the problem of man and the universe, which is death. Christ is the answer to all man's needs, and our response to him is faith. Faith is the essential act of the Christian religion. Let us rejoice in the fact that God has sent us a Redeemer, Jesus Christ, the Son of God made man. He is our life, and he is the answer to the presence of death. If we place our faith in him and in what he has revealed, and live according to this faith, we shall not perish, but have eternal life. Let us live that out in our everyday life and bring the message of it to others.